Welcome into BBN Live on the social media channels for UK Athletics. I'm Christy Thomas with the UK Sports Network. This is being presented by eCoach, and what a fun show we have in store for you, because we are going to be talking about health and wellness and sports performance with a couple of coaches associated with the football program. Please help me welcome Coach Corey Edmond, who is the Director of Performance for Football, and Coach Mark Hill, who is the Director for Performance and Head Strength Coach for Football. Guys, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you guys are doing okay with all the social distancing. You look pretty good.
Thank you. We are doing
Thanks
very
for having
well.
us.
Looking healthy and strong, as I might expect. Well, let's get started here. And you guys tell me a little bit about where you're from, and would love to know something interesting about your hometown.
You want me to start here?
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll take
elder
off first.
statesman.
Okay. Well, I'm from Virginia. I really don't have necessarily a hometown. I'm from the country, and basically, it's this social distancing thing is not new to us because I probably live about 5 miles from my nearest neighbor. So
Okay.
I'm used to that part of life, not having people around, not having neighbors. So that's pretty much right now. It's really easy to deal with the situation that we're dealing with now.
Coach Hill?
I'm from Lynette, Alabama. Really small town. Interesting fact about Lynette, Alabama, is right on the Georgia border. I can actually stand and put one foot in Lynette and one foot in the state of Georgia, West Point, Georgia. I'm right on the cutoff of the Eastern and Central time zone. So when I go back home, although my hometown is on Eastern time, my phone actually changes to Central time because it's right on the cutoff.
Yeah, that keeps it interesting, right? It keeps you on your
Yes,
toes
it
for
does.
sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, so tell me about an activity that you all really loved, or maybe your favorite sport when you were growing up.
Well, I think I didn't necessarily have a favorite sport. I grew up with four brothers, and basically our main deal was being outside doing something, and being out there was as much land as we were had access to. We did almost everything. We did every sport. We did everything that we could find. And the thing about it was we never stayed in the house. That was key. We were never
You
allowed to stay in the house. So
you could have been playing. You could have been playing some hoops because you had a starting five built in.
yeah, one person was always left out when we went 2-on-2. So, and guess
Yeah,
who
there
that
you
person was?
go.
I was the youngest. So.
Yeah, that how great though to be outside. I mean, but I think that's a lot of us can relate to that growing up. So I think that's perfect. Get outside, enjoy that fresh air, that sunshine. It's soothing for the soul. So, Coach Hill, what about you?
You know what? Kind of like Coach Edmond, being from a small town in the country, especially you couldn't stay inside. I loved sports growing up. I've been playing competitive sports since 6 years old. I didn't know what off season was until I
Right.
got to college because I was always going. Actually, baseball was probably my first and major love as far as being a favorite sport. But football, presented the most avenues to get to college on scholarship. And although I had some junior college offers for baseball, I just chose football because it was fun. I had the better offers, and kind of took off with it once I got to college. So
What position did you play in baseball?
I played right field.
All right, power hitter.
Power hit. I was the leadoff hitter, so
Oh,
I had to
okay,
get on.
speed.
And I had to
All
get
right.
on
All right.
35 out of 36 stolen bases my senior
Hey,
year. The only time I got
hey.
caught is because I didn't slide. I didn't slide because I already had a strawberry on my thigh, so I didn't slide.
Oh yeah, you'll never live that one down then, right? Never live that
I
one
know.
down. Well, so you bring up a good point, though, talking about playing baseball and football. Really, I'd love to hear your all's opinion on kids being multi-sport athletes these days, because so much is being made, to your point, Coach Hill, that there is no off season anymore. But a lot of these kids are really specializing too early and too often, playing only one sport. And a lot of college coaches will tell us that they love seeing kids who were multi-sport athletes and grew up being multi-sport athletes. So what are the benefits of that, and why should kids really consider that?
Well, most time when kids play multiple sports, that means they're probably athletic enough to be able to do that. I think that you have to try everything. Put yourself in an avenue where every sport is open game for you, and that's a good deal. And once you figure out, you're going to narrow it down continually. What you're better at and what your skill sets better reflect. But you never want to narrow down while you're younger, because the thing about it is, when you're athletic, your skill acquisition becomes much easier when you get a lot older by playing so many different sports. So you become more athletic, and then when you do become specialized, the specialization becomes a lot easier.
Coach Hill?
My approach is somewhat different. Considering I have a 16-year-old son, I never let him specialize until he got to high school. He's a pretty elite soccer player, but all the way through middle school, he did basketball, football. He's done track, and part of that was just me keeping him active, but also he was one of those kids that really loved sports. But once he got to high school, he had to kind of make a decision because he does want to play collegiate soccer, and it's very demanding in terms of playing high school soccer and club soccer. But I think it just keeps kids active. Kind of like Coach Edmond said, it gives them options, and you'll figure out really quick what you're good at. But if you love it, just keep going. I think a lot of coaches, especially once they get to high school, are pressuring kids to spend more time in a singular sport. But as parents, I think you have to put your foot down, and for as long as you can, keep those kids going
Hmm.
in multiple sports.
What about
And I want to
overuse?
add,
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Coach.
yeah, I was going to add one other thing. It's when we were in high school, we were in smaller towns. So you were a representative of the high school. So if a coach came to you and said, "Well, I need you to help me out in this sport," could you do that? Seeing that you're a pretty good athlete, and we would do that. We just enjoy competing, and I think that that's one thing that's missing. That every day competing, and that's what we got to get our kids used to, regardless of what sport it is. Being a part of a team and competing and helping wherever you can.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that that's one of those scenarios where you think about just competing. It doesn't mean that you're trying to compete and get. If baseball is not your thing, but you're pretty good at it, why not compete and play for your school and play with a team, be competitive there, even if that's not going to lead to a college scholarship. It's okay, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the mindset that a lot of parents have gotten into, is that's really what we're playing for, and it doesn't
Right.
necessarily have to be that. So what about overuse injuries? I mean, I think when we see kids specialize, oftentimes we'll see them have injuries that they shouldn't be having at such a young age.
Well, one of the things that we understand about, like Coach here alluded to, that we didn't have an off season. So you think about this: you go from a starting in fall, we played football, so you were on the grass. Okay, you went from the grass to the hardwood floor. Okay, in basketball, and then you would move in the springtime to either track or either baseball. So you're moving from a different surface. And so usually in the summertime, it's kind of a smorgasbord of whatever sport you decide to do, as well as training for your fall sport. So each season we moved from different fields. We did different movements with the body. So you weren't necessarily concerned about overuse injuries. Usually one season or one sport would help transition into the next sport.
You
Right.
know, Kind of like Coach Edmond said, I think that kids playing multiple sports prepares you obviously because you're working different muscle groups and different movement patterns and whatnot. But a lot of times those overuse injuries, in terms of just one sport, comes from that sedentary factor when you're in that off season and you're not doing anything, and now you're waiting on the transition to get back to that practice of that sport. So now you haven't prepared your body movement wise. It's a lot of sitting down. It's a lot more sitting down than it used to be, obviously, with computer games and video games and
Mm.
whatnot. So you're not moving a lot. So now you come from having 3 months off to diving right into that pattern of either cutting and jumping and whatnot, and your body's not prepped for it.
Tell us a little bit about how you guys got into sports performance, when you knew that that was something that you were really passionate about and wanted to do for a living, Coach Ed.
I've got a computer malfunction here, but okay. Um, The one thing about it is like what you're good at pretty much finds you. And I knew I enjoyed coaching, and coaching was my first love. Coaching, really teaching, was my first love. And I want to be in a setting where, I could teach young men. And it kind of one weekend I decided to do a football camp. Not because I wanted to do a football camp, because I didn't have any money, and I knew I could make a quick buck helping out. And so it was a natural fit. So it was never necessarily a passion. It was a passion to have rent money. That was my passion. And once I got on the field and began teaching these young men, I mean, it was a perfect match. So I knew right then and there that this is probably the way I need to go.
Coach Hill?
For me, it was a bit of a different thing. I can honestly attest. I'm not like all the other football players in college. I can honestly say, with all confidence, I wasn't the best player on my high school football team. There was 10 of us that got scholarships, and I probably was like the fifth or sixth guy. But I held my own and was able to, gain the attention of college coaches and get a scholarship. And so once I got to college, I was what we term a developmental player, and I had to work, and I had to work to get to where I was. And I had a very mean and surly strength coach that just pushed me and drove me, and made me do a lot of things to help me get better. He's kind of on this screen. He looks like Coach Edmond. Oh, Coach Edmond was my strength coach in college. So he helped me become the player that I was. And I went from a developmental player to second leading receiver in the conference, all conference guy. And I saw what strength conditioning helped me do as a player in terms of getting to where I was, and I just fell in love with it. And I always knew that I wanted to coach, and I ended up doing an internship with Coach Edmond while I was in college, and I just had a passion for helping develop guys like I was developed into the player that I was.
And you have to get some. I have to get some backstory with this. It wasn't actually an internship. He was almost like a full time employee, because I was one strength coach and I had every sport, and I needed help. And Mark and his roommate Kenny decided, okay, we'll help you out with all your rest of your sports and everything else. So you never understand and realize that led him to the career that he's in now. Because I said, okay, you're probably going to make a pretty good strength coach if you want to do this full time. But it was overwhelming for me to have that many sports and to oversee that many
Absolutely.
sports and being able to do it by myself. And so, they said, okay, can we use this for an intern and we'll help you out in doing this? And, it was a lot of lunches I had to buy as well, but, it worked out pretty well in the end.
Yeah. That's a great story. When the coach can be much more than just a coach, you really become a mentor in life. And I think that we see that happen so often in athletics, which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it and have loved it from such a small age as well too. Is that you really do see how all of this really starts to infiltrate your life and become a part of the fabric of who
Right.
you are, which I think is fascinating. All right, so obviously we're in unprecedented times and we're stuck at home, and it's hard to be active when you're in this kind of environment. But what kind of advice would you give to especially kids that are really struggling with, and to your point, Coach Hill, you talked about it, the video games and everything that we're really in front of the screen too much. How can they stay active at home?
One of the things, and I don't think it's hard to do. I think you have to take an initiative to be active. It's been kind of difficult in terms of the weather. When we get nice days, it's interesting to see how many people run outside. But even when you
Yeah.
don't have nice weather, just depending on what you have in your house, if you have a big enough house where you can have some space and do certain things. Um, Myself, for my family, I have a 16-year-old, like I said, 16-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter. We try to keep them on schedule. With homeschooling, we do PE, and no better PE teacher than your dad, who's a strength coach. So we have family PE, and we go down there and we get after it for an hour. And it's interesting just to try to blend the workouts. My wife joins us. She, was a collegiate track athlete, and so just trying to get things to blend my 8-year-old daughter with my 16-year-old son. And we do interesting things. We do a lot of body weight stuff, push ups, sit ups. We do jump ropes, met ball work, just different stuff. And you have to try to stay active. I learned how to play Foursquare. Never, my kids thought I was weird because I had never heard of Foursquare. And we did a Foursquare, diagram out on the deck, and it turned into a just competitive game like anything in my family. And it was a full out sweat. I didn't know the rules; they were making up rules as we went. But
Kids do
you have
that,
to take
right?
an
Yeah.
initiative. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. But
Yeah.
you just have to take an initiative to be active. And there's always something that you can do. You can, jump rope, hopscotch. It's great things in that. One of the things that I did, for my kids is I took some tape and put like a 24-inch line on the ground, and we did some footwork drills. 15 seconds, and take a 15-second break, and they were in a full out sweat by the time we got done. But there's a lot of things that you can do that you don't necessarily need a lot of fancy equipment to be able to do, but you just have to take an initiative to do those things.
Now, I speak for the older parents. I'm an empty nester, so I don't have kids in the house anymore. So I pretty much reinvented myself to be a handyman. So I'm steadily doing task after task after task after task. So that's pretty much how older people can keep themselves active. There's a lot of things around the house you can get done, and believe me, I'm finding that out. So
Coach, Coach,
just
can I
go
say that I
ahead.
agree with you on that? I was actually pressure washing the sidewalk the other day. And I'm like, I woke up sore the next day. I'm like, what in the world? My tricep hurt.
So
Oh
you
man.
can find things to do to keep you busy.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is also something too, as we talk about, and we'll talk more about nutrition. But that's huge with this as well too, in terms of any kind of sports performance, and has become really something that's on the forefront for a lot of college athletes, but even for kids as well too. So is there something that you guys are doing from a nutrition standpoint while you're also trying to stay active that's helping you in a time like this?
I think your regular routine is huge. For us as a family, we always try to eat pretty healthy. Not saying that we don't have a little snack here and there, a little junk food here and there, but we try to do the things necessary to keep our kids healthy. Especially with everything that's going on, it's essential. Taking vitamins, your vitamin C intake, anything to build that immune system. Whatever your regular routine was, that would help. But if you don't have a healthy regular routine, especially with the time that you're spending in the house right now,
Hmm.
with social distancing and quarantining and everything else, it's very essential that you are eating the right things, and you're not sitting there gorging on snack food and sugary drinks and whatnot. Because if you're not being active, all that sugar, all that stuff is going to turn into fat. And you're going to pick up weight really quick, and it's going to be unwanted weight. It's going to be bad weight. So I think nutrition, proper nutrition, especially in a time like this, is key.
Coach Ed?
Well, the thing about it is, one of the things that Coach Hill said was keeping yourself on a schedule. And
Yeah.
the greatest thing I've heard was that, even if you have kids at home, you don't have a refrigerator in your classroom, do you? So if you don't have a refrigerator in your classroom, why do you keep going back and forth to the refrigerator at home? So you need to keep your kids on the schedule, for everything they do. There's snack times, there's scheduled times when you do eat and you don't eat. So I think that's the greatest thing about it is scheduling, when you have your meals. And as we alluded to before we started this discussion, I just taking the time right now to really back away from the foods, not to be a hoarder of foods and thinking that all of a sudden there's going to be a food crisis. You know, I'm taking this time to be healthier, to drink more water and to do the things I need to do to keep my body where it needs to be.
Well, I said we actually, you're right. Before we came on live, we were talking about that, and how impressed I am, Coach Ed, that you're able to do that, because I said, oftentimes we talk about it, but actually doing it and implementing it is something totally different. So I think it does take some discipline to be able to say, this is how I'm going to do it, and this is what I'm going to do. Lay out a plan for that, but then also to stay on a schedule, because I can tell you, I have two. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and trying to keep them on a schedule
Right.
becomes a full time job in and of itself. So
Absolutely.
uh, but I think you guys all bring up some really great points and some really good things, that it's just a matter of setting a schedule, trying your best to stick to it, and then just making an effort to really focus on being healthy and being active. And that doesn't mean to, I think, Coach Hill, you bring up a good point with you don't necessarily have to have something so very structured in order to be active. It can just be being outside. It can be doing handyman activities around the house, lots of options and lots of things that really do equate to physical activity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for this. This was a lot of fun. And we got some great perspective on what we should all be doing at home to be better, and no excuses, right? At this point, no excuses.
And no
Get
excuses.
outside, bike ride, walk, do something.
There you go. No
Just
excuses.
keep your
You heard
distance. That's all.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, there you
Definitely.
go. 6 feet apart. We're doing it. We're doing it. Do your part. That's exactly. All right. Well, Coach Mark Hill and Coach Corey Edmond, thank you so much for joining us on another edition of BBN Live presented by eCoach. We sure appreciate it. And we cross our fingers and hope that we're going to see you very, very soon on a football field, which is where we all want to be. So hopefully we all stay healthy and can make that happen very soon. So thanks for joining us on this edition of BBN Live.